Sarah Mitchell's shoes clicked against the marble floor of the Chicago courthouse, echoing through the empty hallway. She was already 10 minutes late. Her heart pounded as she checked her phone again. Courtroom 12A, the message read. Traffic on Lakeshore Drive had been a nightmare, and now she was rushing to witness her best friend's custody hearing for moral support. The hallway stretched endlessly before her, doors lining both sides with bronze plaques bearing numbers. 10B, 11A, 11B. Her eyes scanned frantically. There it was, 12B. Wait, was it 12A or 12B? She pulled out her phone, but the screen was black. Dead battery. Perfect. It has to be this one, she whispered to herself, hand trembling slightly as she reached for the heavy wooden door. The metal handle felt cold against her palm as she pushed it open, trying to be as quiet as possible. The moment she stepped inside, something felt wrong. This wasn't right. The courtroom was packed, but these weren't the faces she expected to see. An elderly judge sat behind the bench, his weathered face stern yet somehow kind. But what caught her attention, what made her freeze completely in the doorway with her hand still on the handle, was the scene unfolding before her. A young man, probably in his early 20s, stood before the judge. His clothes were worn, his face gaunt, and his hands trembled as he clutched a piece of paper. Beside him stood a public defender who looked as exhausted as his client, but it was the expression on the young man's face that stopped Sarah's heart. Pure, undiluted desperation mixed with something she couldn't quite name. Hope, fear, both. Your Honor, the young man's voice cracked. I know what I did was wrong. I know stealing is wrong. But my daughter, she needed medicine. The pharmacy wouldn't fill the prescription without payment, and I didn't know what else to do. Sarah knew she should leave. This wasn't her courtroom. This wasn't her business. Her hand moved toward the door handle to slip back out, but something rooted her to the spot. The judge removed his glasses, cleaning them slowly with a handkerchief, a gesture that seemed to carry the weight of 1,000 similar cases. Mr. Davis, he began, his voice filling the courtroom, you understand that theft is a serious offense. The store owner has every right to press charges. I understand, Your Honor. The young man, Mr. Davis, nodded, his eyes glistening. I'm ready to accept whatever punishment you think is right. I just want my daughter to be okay. She's only 4 years old and her mother passed away 6 months ago. It's just been me and Emma since then. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Sarah felt her own eyes beginning to burn. She should leave. She really should leave. But her feet wouldn't move. The store owner, a middle-aged man in a rumpled suit, stood up from the gallery. Your Honor, if I may speak? The judge nodded. I've been thinking about this case all week, the store owner continued, his voice softer than Sarah expected. James, Mr. Davis, he didn't take cash. He didn't take anything he could sell. He took a bottle of children's fever reducer and some antibiotics. That's it. When my security guard caught him, he didn't run. He broke down crying, begging us to call a doctor for his daughter before we called the police. Sarah's hand flew to her mouth. This was supposed to be a simple theft case, but it was becoming something else entirely, something that made her heart ache in ways she couldn't explain. But here's what no one in that courtroom knew yet, what would only become clear in the next few moments. This wasn't just about one man and his daughter. The judge leaned forward, his eyes moving between Mr. Davis and the store owner. Mr. Peterson, are you saying you wish to drop the charges? The store owner, Mr. Peterson, shifted uncomfortably. Not exactly, Your Honor. I mean, technically a crime was committed, but I've been thinking about what justice really means, and I'm not sure sending this man to jail serves justice. It just creates more problems. What happens to his daughter if he's incarcerated? Sarah felt tears sliding down her cheeks now. She tried to wipe them away discreetly, but her hand was shaking. Around the courtroom, she noticed others were similarly affected. A woman in the back row was openly crying. A young lawyer had his head bowed, his jaw clenched with emotion. Mr. Davis's public defender stood up. Your Honor, my client has no prior criminal record. He's worked 2 jobs for the past 3 years to support his daughter. He's never missed a rent payment until his wife got sick. The medical bills bankrupted them. He lost 1 job because he had to care for his wife during her final weeks. He's been hanging on by a thread, trying to keep his daughter safe and healthy, while grieving the loss of his wife. The judge's expression remained neutral, but Sarah noticed his knuckles were white as he gripped his gavel. The courtroom had fallen into complete silence, the kind of silence that feels heavy with unspoken emotion. Mr. Davis, the judge said finally, what you did was wrong. The law is clear on that. But, he paused, and in that pause, Sarah felt the entire room hold its breath. But the law should also be just. And justice without mercy isn't justice at all. It's just punishment for punishment's sake. What happened next would be something Sarah would remember for the rest of her life. something that would restore her faith in humanity during a time when she desperately needed it. The judge set down his gavel with a soft tap that seemed to echo forever. Mr. Peterson, I appreciate your perspective. However, I cannot simply dismiss charges without proper resolution. Mr. Davis committed a crime, albeit one born of desperation rather than malice. Sarah's heart sank. Here it comes, she thought, the hammer of justice without the balance of mercy. But then the judge did something unexpected. He stood up, removed his robe, and stepped down from the bench. The courtroom collectively gasped. Even the bailiff looked confused. As a judge, I must uphold the law, he said, his voice carrying a warmth Sarah hadn't heard before. But as a human being, a father, and a grandfather, I can't ignore what I'm seeing here. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his wallet. Mr. Davis, how much was the medicine? James Davis looked stunned. Your Honor, I don't understand. It was $47.32. The judge pulled out several bills. Mr. Peterson, I'm paying for the stolen merchandise. The debt is settled. Mr. Davis, you will repay me when you're able. No interest, no deadline, just a promise between two fathers. The courtroom erupted in whispers. Sarah's hand was fully covering her mouth now, tears streaming freely down her face. This wasn't supposed to happen. Judges didn't do this. This wasn't how the system worked. But then Mr. Peterson stood up again. Your Honor, with the debt paid, I officially withdraw all charges. The public defender looked like he might faint from relief. James Davis collapsed into his chair, his body shaking with sobs. But the judge wasn't finished yet. However, he continued, holding up a hand for silence, Mr. Davis, you must understand that this is not a solution to your problems. It's a bridge, a very small bridge over a very deep river. What happens the next time Emma gets sick? What happens when rent is due? James looked up, his face wet with tears. I don't know, Your Honor. I honestly don't know. I'm trying so hard, but everything keeps falling apart. That's when something remarkable happened. Something that would make Sarah understand why she walked into the wrong courtroom that day. Something that would change not just James Davis's life, but her own. A woman in the third row stood up. She was elderly, probably in her 70s, wearing a simple floral dress. Your Honor, I'm a retired nurse. I heard Mr. Davis say his daughter needs ongoing care. I volunteer at the community health clinic on Mason Street. We offer free pediatric care. I can make sure Emma gets proper treatment. Before anyone could respond, a man in a business suit from the back row stood up. I own a construction company. We're always looking for reliable workers. If Mr. Davis is willing to work hard, I can offer him a position. It comes with health insurance. Sarah watched in amazement as person after person stood up. I run a daycare. Emma can have a spot, subsidized rate. I'm a lawyer. I can help with the medical debt, file for bankruptcy protection if needed. I have a rental property. The tenant just moved out. First month free if he needs a place. James Davis had collapsed completely now, his head in his hands, shoulders shaking with the force of his emotions. His public defender had tears streaming down his face, not even trying to hide them anymore. The judge had to wipe his own eyes before he could speak. Let the record show, he said, his voice thick with emotion, that this court has witnessed something rare and beautiful today. The spontaneous compassion of strangers. This is what justice should look like. Not just punishment, but restoration. Not just enforcement, but humanity. Sarah realized she was no longer standing in the doorway. She had moved forward, drawn into the room by the magnetic pull of what was happening. And before she could stop herself, before she could think about what it meant, she found herself speaking. I work at Northwestern Memorial, she heard herself say, her voice shaking. I can connect Emma with pediatric specialists. We have programs for families in need. James looked up at her, and their eyes met. In that moment, Sarah saw everything. The grief, the fear, the desperate love of a father for his daughter, and now, blooming like a flower after rain, hope, real genuine hope. The judge returned to his bench, but he didn't put his robe back on. Mr. Davis, I'm going to dismiss these charges with prejudice, meaning they cannot be brought again, but more than that, I'm going to do something I've never done in 30 years on the bench. He pulled out a business card and wrote something on the back. This is my personal number, not my office, not my clerk, my personal cell phone. You call me if you need help. You call me if Emma gets sick. You call me if any of these good people don't follow through, though I believe they will. James took the card with trembling hands. Your Honor, I don't have words. Thank you doesn't seem like enough. Then don't say it. The judge smiled. Just be a good father to Emma. That's all the thanks I need. Case dismissed. The gavel came down with finality, but instead of ending something, it felt like a beginning. The courtroom erupted in applause. People were hugging strangers. The bailiff was crying. Even the court reporter had to pause to compose herself. Sarah stood there, overwhelmed by what she'd witnessed. She had walked into the wrong courtroom by accident. Or maybe, just maybe, she had walked into exactly the right place at exactly the right time. As people began to file out, exchanging contact information with James, making plans to help, Sarah felt a hand on her shoulder.
She turned to find the judge standing there. "You weren't supposed to be here, were you?" he asked with a knowing smile. Sarah shook her head. "Wrong courtroom. I was looking for 12A. "Wrong courtroom," he repeated thoughtfully. "Or perhaps the right one. Do you believe in Providence, Mist? Mitchell, Sarah Mitchell. And I came here feeling pretty cynical about the world, about people. But this, what just happened?" The judge nodded. "This is what happens when we choose to see people instead of just problems, when we choose compassion over judgment. This is what's possible when we remember that justice and mercy aren't opposites, they're partners." 3 months later, Sarah found herself back in that same courthouse. This time she was in the right courtroom, 12A. Her friend's custody case had been resolved amicably, and they were grabbing coffee at the cafe across the street. "You've been distracted all morning," her friend Lisa said. "What's going on?" Sarah pulled out her phone and showed Lisa a photo. It was of a little girl, maybe 4 years old, with bright eyes and a huge smile. She was wearing a pink dress and holding a certificate. "Who's this?" Lisa asked. "This is Emma Davis. Her father sent me this yesterday. She just finished her treatment protocol. The doctors say she's completely healthy now." Sarah's voice caught, and she had to take a moment to compose herself. Her dad got the construction job. He's been working hard, got promoted to supervisor. The community health clinic has been amazing with her care. And remember that rental property someone offered? He's been able to save enough to start building a real emergency fund. Lisa looked at the photo, then at Sarah. "This is that case you told me about, the one you stumbled into by accident?" "Yeah," Sarah nodded. "I still think about it almost every day. How one moment of compassion from that judge sparked something bigger. How all those strangers came together for someone they didn't even know." She paused, staring at Emma's photo. "Lisa, I've been thinking. I've been so focused on my career, on climbing the ladder, on making more money. But that day in the courtroom, watching all those people help a stranger, it showed me what really matters." "What are you saying?" Lisa asked carefully. Sarah looked up with determination in her eyes. "I'm saying I'm done being a passive observer of life. I'm done walking past people who need help. I'm done pretending that other people's problems aren't my concern." She pulled out another photo, this one of herself at a volunteer orientation. "I started volunteering at that community health clinic, just 2 evenings a week, helping families navigate the system, connecting them with resources. It's not much, but it's something." Lisa reached across the table and squeezed Sarah's hand. "I'm proud of you, but I have to ask, have you seen James? Or the judge? Do you know how they're doing?" Sarah smiled, a real smile that reached her eyes. "Actually, I saw them both last week. There's something I haven't told you yet." She pulled up another photo, this one showing a large group of people gathered around a table. Sarah pointed to faces in the crowd. "This is James. This is Emma. This is Judge Morrison. Yes, that judge. And these are all the people who helped that day in the courtroom." Lisa's eyes widened. "You all stayed in touch. More than that, we meet once a month now. We call ourselves the 12B Foundation, after the courtroom number. We pool our resources and help families in crisis. Nothing huge, nothing official, just people helping people." Sarah's eyes sparkled with emotion. "Judge Morrison says that day changed him too. He'd been on the bench for 30 years, and he'd started to lose hope, started to see defendants as just cases, just numbers. But James reminded him why he became a judge in the first place, to help people, not just punish them." She swiped to another photo, this one of Judge Morrison sitting on the floor, playing with Emma and several other children. "He's retiring next month. He says he wants to spend his retirement doing more of what he did that day, helping families directly, instead of just from behind a bench." "And what about the store owner, Mr. Peterson?" Lisa asked. Sarah laughed softly. "He's our biggest donor. Turns out he'd been feeling guilty about pressing charges from the beginning. He said watching that courtroom come together to help James showed him what his business could really be about. He's partnered with the community clinic now, providing supplies at cost for families who can't afford them." Lisa sat back in her chair, overwhelmed. "This is incredible. But Sarah, I have to ask, why didn't you tell me any of this before?" Sarah looked down at her coffee cup, choosing her words carefully. "Because I needed to make sure it was real. I needed to know it wasn't just a moment of emotion that would fade. I needed to see if compassion could actually sustain itself, or if it was just a flash in the pan." "And," Lisa prompted. "And it's real," Sarah said with conviction. "It's so real. Last month we helped a single mother whose car broke down and she couldn't get to work. The month before that we covered groceries for an elderly couple whose social security got delayed. It's not always dramatic. It's not always a courtroom scene, but it's always human. It's always real." She looked up at Lisa with tears in her eyes. "I walked into the wrong courtroom that day feeling lost. I'd been going through the motions of life, showing up, doing my job, going home. I'd forgotten what it meant to really connect with people, to really care about something beyond my own little bubble. And now," Lisa asked softly, "now I understand that there's no such thing as the wrong place when your heart is open to the right thing. I was supposed to be in that courtroom, not for my friend's case, not for any logical reason, but because I needed to see what humanity looks like when we strip away all the barriers we put up." Sarah pulled out one final photo, and this one made her voice break completely. It showed James and Emma, but they weren't alone. They were surrounded by what looked like an extended family. Judge Morrison with his arm around James's shoulders, Mr. Peterson kneeling beside Emma, the elderly nurse holding Emma's hand, and Sarah herself, standing in the back with a smile that lit up her entire face. "This was taken last week," Sarah whispered. "At Emma's healthy party, that's what we called it, a celebration that she's completely recovered. But it was more than that. It was a celebration of what people can do when they choose compassion over indifference." Lisa wiped her own eyes now. "Sarah, this is beautiful. But why are you telling me all this today?" Sarah reached into her bag and pulled out a folder. "Because I need your help. You're a journalist, Lisa. You tell stories for a living, and this story, this message, needs to be heard." She pushed the folder across the table. "I've been documenting everything. The monthly meetings, the families we've helped, the ripple effects. Judge Morrison says he's seen a shift in the courthouse. Other judges are starting to ask questions, starting to think differently about what justice means." "You want me to write about this?" Lisa asked, opening the folder. "I want you to help spread what we've learned. That compassion isn't weakness. That helping others doesn't diminish us. It elevates everyone. That one moment of choosing humanity over judgment can spark a movement." Sarah leaned forward intensely. "Lisa, we're living in a world that tells us to look out for ourselves, to build walls instead of bridges, to see others as competition instead of community. But that courtroom proved something different is possible." She gestured to the photos spread across the table. "Look at these faces. Different ages, different backgrounds, different beliefs probably. But united by one simple choice, to help someone who needed it. No judgment, no conditions, just human compassion." Lisa studied the photos, and Sarah could see the journalist mind working. "This is powerful, Sarah. But I have to ask, what do you want people to take away from this? What's the core message?" Sarah didn't hesitate. "That we're all one bad day away from being James Davis. That we're all one crisis away from needing help. And that when we recognize our shared humanity, when we choose to see people instead of problems, incredible things become possible." She pointed to the photo of Emma. "This little girl has her health, because a judge chose mercy. She has stability, because strangers chose compassion. She has hope, because people chose to care. And James, he has his dignity back, not because someone handed him charity, but because people invested in his humanity." 3 weeks later, Lisa's article went viral. The headline read, "The Wrong Courtroom, the Right Moment, How Accidental Compassion Sparked a Movement." Sarah's phone wouldn't stop ringing. News outlets wanted interviews. Social media was exploding with 12B Foundation posts. People from across the country were reaching out, asking how they could start similar initiatives in their communities. But the message that meant the most came from an unknown number late one night. "Miss Mitchell, this is James Davis. I just want you to know that Emma read the article today. Well, I read it to her. She asked me why all those people helped us. I told her it's because people are good. She asked if that means the world is good. I said, yes, baby, the world is good. Thank you for helping me believe that again." Sarah sat in her apartment, reading that message over and over, tears flowing freely. She thought about that Tuesday morning 3 months ago, when her phone died and she walked into the wrong courtroom. She thought about how one small mistake led to witnessing something that changed her entire perspective on life. The next day she got a call from Judge Morrison. "Have you seen the news?" he asked, his voice excited. 3 judges in Detroit just implemented a new protocol based on what happened in my courtroom. They're calling it compassionate justice. They're training court staff to identify defendants who need help, not just punishment." "That's incredible," Sarah breathed. "It gets better," Judge Morrison continued. "I got a call from the State Bar Association. They want to develop a program connecting lawyers with community resources for clients in crisis. They're calling it the 12B Initiative." Sarah felt goosebumps rising on her arms. "Judge, when you handed James that money, did you have any idea it would lead to this?" There was a long pause. "No," he said finally. "I just knew I couldn't look at that young father and not see my own son. I couldn't hear about his daughter and not think of my granddaughter. I couldn't enforce the law without acknowledging the humanity involved." "And now?" Sarah asked. "Now I see that every small act of compassion is a seed. We never know which ones will take root and grow into something bigger, but that's not our job. Our job is just to plant the seeds." 6 months after that fateful Tuesday, Sarah found herself back at the courthouse. This time, she was there intentionally, accompanying a young woman named Maria, who was facing eviction proceedings. As they walked through the now familiar hallway, Sarah felt her heart racing. They passed courtroom 12A, the one she'd originally been looking for that day. Then they came to 12B, and Sarah paused for just a moment, her hand on the door. "Is this the right room?" Maria asked nervously. Sarah smiled. "Yes, this is exactly the right room." They entered, and Sarah was startled to see Judge Morrison still sitting on the bench. He'd said he was retiring, but when he saw Sarah, he smiled and gave her a small nod. The case ahead of theirs wrapped up, and then Maria's name was called. As they stood before the bench, Sarah noticed the courtroom was unusually full. That was strange for an eviction hearing. Judge Morrison looked at the case file, then at Maria. "Miss Hernandez, I see you've fallen behind on rent due to medical expenses for your mother. Is that correct?" Yes, Your Honor, Maria said, her voice shaking. I'm trying to catch up, but the bills keep coming, and I understand. Judge Morrison interrupted gently. Before we proceed, I want to tell you about something that happened in this very courtroom 6 months ago. Sarah's eyes widened. What was he doing? For the next 10 minutes, Judge Morrison recounted the story of James Davis. He told Maria about the theft, the medicine, the daughter. He told her about the choice between law and mercy. He told her about the strangers who stood up to help. The reason I'm telling you this, Miss Hernandez, he concluded, is because that day changed how I see my role here. Justice isn't just about enforcing rules. It's about finding solutions. It's about seeing people. He gestured to the gallery, and Sarah turned to see familiar faces. James Davis was there, the elderly nurse, the construction company owner, and dozens of others Sarah didn't recognize. Miss Hernandez, Judge Morrison continued, these people are here because they heard about your situation through the 12B Foundation. They're here because they believe in second chances and helping hands. Before I make any ruling today, they'd like to speak. What followed was similar to that day 6 months ago, but different, more organized, more intentional, but no less powerful. One by one, people stood up offering help. A lawyer to negotiate with the landlord, a social worker to help access medical assistance for Maria's mother, a job offer with flexible hours, an interest-free loan to cover the back rent. But the moment that made Sarah's heart stop was when James Davis stood up. James cleared his throat, and the courtroom fell silent. Your Honor, 6 months ago I stood where Miss Hernandez is standing now, desperate, afraid, sure that the world was against me and my daughter. Then something happened that I still can't fully explain. He looked directly at Maria. These people, these strangers, they saved my life, not just financially, though they did that too. They saved my life by showing me that compassion isn't dead, that humanity isn't lost, that we're not alone in this world. His voice grew stronger. I have a good job now. I have health insurance for Emma. I have a home. I have hope. And I learned something important. You can't keep compassion to yourself. It's like a flame. If you hold it close, it dies. But if you pass it on, it lights up the darkness for others. He pulled out an envelope. Your Honor, I'd like to pay Ms. Hernandez back rent. All of it. Consider it paying forward what was given to me. The courtroom erupted in gasps. Sarah's hand flew to her mouth. She'd had no idea James was planning this. Judge Morrison had to call for order. Mr. Davis, that's a generous offer. But that's over $3,000. Are you certain? I'm certain, Your Honor. Someone once told me that every act of compassion is a seed. I'm planting seeds now. Emma and I were planting seeds. Maria collapsed into tears. Sarah moved to support her, and as she did, she caught Judge Morrison's eye. He was crying too, not even trying to hide it. Miss Hernandez, the judge said, his voice thick with emotion, with your back rent settled, and with the support system these people are offering, I see no reason to proceed with eviction. Case dismissed. The gavel came down, and the courtroom exploded in applause, but Sarah barely heard it. She was watching James hug Emma, who had been sitting quietly in the front row. She was watching Maria sob with relief. She was watching strangers embrace like family. This was what that wrong turn had led to. This was why her phone had died that Tuesday morning. This was the path she was meant to walk.
After the courtroom cleared, Sarah found herself alone with Judge Morrison in the empty chamber. He was packing up his briefcase, moving slowly, deliberately.
You're really retiring this time?
Sarah asked. He nodded. Yes, but not because I'm tired, because I finally understand what I'm meant to do. Turns out you can be a judge without a robe and a gavel. You can deliver justice from anywhere if you're committed to seeing people, not just problems. Judge Morrison, can I ask you something? Sarah sat down in the front row. That day with James Davis, was it really spontaneous, or did you plan it somehow? The judge smiled, that same knowing smile from 6 months ago. Sarah, I've been a judge for 30 years. I've seen thousands of cases. Most of them blur together after a while. But every so often, you see something that reminds you why you took this job in the first place. He sat down beside her. When James stood before me, I saw my own grandson. When I heard about Emma needing medicine, I remembered my daughter's illness years ago, before I had money for fancy doctors. I remembered what desperation feels like, what love for a child feels like, what it's like to feel completely alone. So it was spontaneous. Sarah pressed. The money, the personal phone number. Yes, that was spontaneous. But creating the space for compassion, that was intentional. You see, Sarah, I realized something that day. The law is important, but it's not everything. Sometimes, the most just thing we can do is create an opportunity for mercy to flourish. He stood up, shouldering his briefcase. You walking into the wrong courtroom wasn't an accident. Maybe in the cosmic sense, there are no accidents. Maybe you were meant to witness that moment so you could carry the message forward. Maybe James was meant to struggle so he could later become someone who helps others struggle less. That seems like a lot of maybes, Sarah said softly. Judge Morrison smiled. Life is full of maybes. But here's what I know for certain. Compassion is contagious. You witnessed it that day. You caught it. And now look at how far it's spread. 1 year later, Sarah stood outside courtroom 12B with a camera crew. Lisa's article had led to a documentary. The documentary had led to a book. The book had led to a national movement. The 12B Foundation had expanded to 17 cities. Judges across the country were implementing compassionate justice protocols. Law schools were teaching courses on balancing justice with mercy. And it all traced back to one Tuesday morning, when a woman walked into the wrong courtroom. Emma Davis, now 5 years old, ran up to Sarah with a drawing. "Miss Sarah, look what I made." The drawing showed a courtroom with stick figures holding hands. At the top, in careful kindergarten letters, it read, "When people help people." Sarah knelt down to Emma's level. "It's beautiful, sweetie. Is this our courtroom?" Emma nodded enthusiastically. "Daddy says our courtroom is magic. He says it makes bad things turn into good things. Is that true?" Sarah glanced up at James, who stood nearby with tears in his eyes. She looked back at Emma's hopeful face. "Yes, sweetheart, it's true, but it's not the courtroom that's magic. It's the people in it. When we choose to help each other, when we choose kindness over judgment, when we choose to see each other's humanity, that's the real magic." Emma hugged Sarah tightly. "I want to make magic when I grow up." "You already are, Emma. You already are." As the camera crew filmed their interaction, Sarah felt a hand on her shoulder. She turned to find Judge Morrison, now fully retired, wearing jeans and a casual shirt instead of his judicial robes. "They want us to do an interview," he said. "Talk about how it all started. What should we tell them?" Sarah looked around at the small crowd that had gathered. James and Emma, Maria and her mother, both healthy and thriving, Mr. Peterson, who had become the foundation's primary donor, the elderly nurse, who now coordinated all their healthcare initiatives, dozens of others, whose lives had been touched by that one moment of spontaneous compassion. "We tell them the truth," Sarah said. "We tell them that sometimes the wrong turn leads you exactly where you need to be. We tell them that one moment of choosing humanity over judgment can change the world. We tell them that compassion isn't weakness, it's the strongest force we have." Judge Morrison nodded. "And we tell them that everyone has the power to create change. You don't need a gavel or a robe, you just need to see people, really see them." The interview began, and Sarah shared her story. But as she talked, she realized it wasn't really her story at all. It was James's story, Emma's story, Judge Morrison's story. It was the story of every person who had ever felt alone and discovered they weren't. It was the story of humanity at its best. 3 days after the documentary aired, Sarah received a call from an unknown number with a Washington, D.C. area code. "Miss Mitchell, this is Senator Patricia Reynolds. I watched your documentary, and I need to speak with you about something urgent." Sarah's heart skipped. "Senator Reynolds, of course, what can I do for you?" "It's not what you can do for me." The senator's voice was warm but serious. "It's what we might be able to do together. I'm proposing legislation, the Compassionate Justice Act. It would provide federal funding for programs like your 12B Foundation. It would train judges in restorative justice. It would create a nationwide network of community support for people caught in the legal system through no fault of their own." Sarah sat down heavily. "Senator, that's incredible. But why are you calling me?" "Because laws without heart are just words on paper. I need you to help me understand what real compassion looks like in practice. I need James Davis to testify before Congress. I need Judge Morrison's expertise. I need your foundation's framework. This could change the entire justice system, Sarah, but only if we do it right." Sarah's mind was racing. "Senator, I need to talk to the others. This is bigger than anything we imagined." "I understand, but Sarah, that wrong turn you took, it might just change the course of American justice. Think about it." After hanging up, Sarah immediately called an emergency meeting of the Foundation's core members. Within 2 hours, they were all gathered in the community center, where they held their monthly meetings. Judge Morrison, James, Mr. Peterson, the elderly nurse whose name was Dorothy, and a dozen others. Sarah explained the senator's proposal. The room fell silent. Finally, James spoke. "A year ago, I was stealing medicine for my daughter. Now a senator wants me to testify before Congress?" He laughed, but it was tinged with disbelief. "How is this real?" Judge Morrison leaned forward. "It's real because truth is powerful. Your story, James, isn't just about one man and his daughter. It's about a system that often forgets the human beings within it. If we can help change that nationally." "But what if we fail?" Dorothy interrupted. "What if this becomes just another government program that sounds good but doesn't actually help people?" Sarah had been wondering the same thing. "That's why we need to be involved. We need to make sure this stays true to what happened in that courtroom. It can't just be about policy, it has to be about people. 6 weeks later, James Davis sat at a table in a congressional hearing room, microphone in front of him, cameras everywhere. His hands were shaking, but Emma was sitting in the front row with Sarah, giving him courage. "Mr. Davis," Senator Reynolds began gently, "can you tell us about the day you were arrested for theft?" James took a deep breath. Emma had been sick for 3 days, fever of 103. My wife had passed away 6 months before, and I'd lost my job because I'd taken too much time off to care for her. I had no insurance. The emergency room said it would be $800 just to be seen. His voice cracked. I went to the pharmacy because I knew what she needed, just fever reducer and antibiotics. Basic stuff, but I didn't have the $47. I thought if I could just get her through this crisis, I could figure everything else out later. "And what happened when you were caught?" the senator asked. "I didn't run. I didn't fight. I just broke down. I begged them to help Emma before they called the police. I remember thinking this was it. I was going to jail, and my daughter would end up in foster care. I'd failed her. I'd failed my wife's memory. I'd failed at everything." The hearing room was completely silent. Several Congress members were visibly emotional. "But that's not what happened," Senator Reynolds prompted. "No." James looked up, and for the first time he smiled. "That's not what happened. Because I ended up in a courtroom with a judge who chose to see me as a human being instead of just a criminal. Because strangers chose compassion over judgment. Because people I'd never met decided my daughter's life mattered." He pulled out a photo of Emma, holding it up for the cameras. "This is Emma today, healthy, happy, thriving. She exists in this state because people chose kindness. Because a judge named Morrison chose mercy. Because a woman named Sarah Mitchell walked into the wrong courtroom at exactly the right time." Senator Reynolds nodded. "Mr. Davis, in your opinion, what would have happened under the current system? Without that intervention?" James's expression grew somber. "I would have been convicted. Probably gotten probation since it was a first offense, but the conviction would have stayed on my record. Getting a job would have been nearly impossible. Emma might have been taken into state custody while I figured things out. I probably would have spiraled, maybe turned to crime for real because I had no other options. And Emma..." His voice broke. "Emma might have grown up without her father." He leaned into the microphone. "The current system is designed to punish. And sometimes punishment is necessary. But it doesn't account for context. It doesn't account for humanity. It doesn't ask how do we solve this. It only asks how do we penalize this." After James testified, it was Judge Morrison's turn. He approached the microphone with the same calm dignity he'd carried on the bench for 30 years. "Members of Congress," he began, "I violated protocol that day in my courtroom. I stepped down from the bench. I paid for stolen merchandise out of my own pocket. I gave a defendant my personal phone number. By traditional standards, I could have been sanctioned or even removed from the bench." He paused, letting that sink in. "But here's what I realized in that moment. We've created a justice system that's so focused on being impartial that we've forgotten to be human. Impartiality doesn't mean coldness. Justice doesn't require cruelty. Fairness doesn't demand we ignore suffering." A younger congressman raised his hand. "Judge Morrison, aren't you advocating for preferential treatment? How do we balance compassion with equality under the law? That's the question, isn't it?" Judge Morrison nodded. "But I'd challenge the premise. Compassion isn't preferential treatment, it's seeing the full picture. When we only look at the crime and not the circumstances, we're not being fair, we're being blind." He gestured to James, still sitting at the witness table. "Mr. Davis committed a crime. That's a fact. But here's another fact. He committed it out of desperate love for his daughter. Should those two facts be weighed equally? Our current system says yes. I'm saying that's wrong. So what's the alternative?" another senator asked. "How do we implement compassion systematically?" "Training," Judge Morrison said firmly. "We train doctors to have bedside manner while maintaining medical objectivity. We can train judges to have compassion while maintaining legal objectivity. We create protocols for identifying cases where intervention could prevent recidivism. We partner courts with community resources. We measure success not just by punishment delivered, but by lives restored." Sarah watched from the gallery as the congressional panel peppered Judge Morrison with questions. She could see minds changing, perspectives shifting. This was really happening. But then a senator from Texas stood up, his expression skeptical. "This all sounds wonderful, Judge Morrison, but let's be realistic. You're describing a resource-intensive program in a time of budget constraints. How do we pay for this? And more importantly, why should taxpayers fund support for criminals?" The room tensed. This was the opposition they'd been expecting. Judge Morrison didn't flinch. "Senator, I appreciate your concern about fiscal responsibility. So let me put this in economic terms. When Mr. Davis was arrested, the state was prepared to spend approximately $35,000 on his incarceration. That's the average annual cost per inmate in our state. Emma would have likely entered foster care, costing the state roughly $28,000 per year." He pulled out a document. "Instead, the intervention cost the community approximately $8,000 in total. Legal assistance, medical care coordination, and bridge support until he got stable employment. Mr. Davis is now a productive taxpayer. Emma is a healthy child who will never need to rely on state support due to trauma from losing her father to incarceration." The judge leaned forward.
Senator, compassion isn't just morally right, it's economically smart. We can pay a little now to restore lives, or we can pay a lot later to manage the consequences of our failure to act. The room erupted in murmurs. Sarah saw several senators nodding, making notes. During a recess, Sarah found herself alone in a corridor with Senator Reynolds. That was powerful testimony, the senator said. But I need to be honest with you, Sarah. Even with everything we've presented, this bill faces an uphill battle. There's resistance. People who think we're being soft on crime. People who believe compassion has no place in justice. Sarah felt her hope deflating. So what do? We tell more stories, Senator Reynolds said. We show them it's not just James Davis. We show them the 17 cities where the 12B Foundation is operating. We show them the recidivism rates dropping. We show them the families staying together. We make it impossible to ignore. She pulled out her phone and showed Sarah an email. This came in during the hearing. It's from a woman in Oregon whose son was helped by your Portland chapter. She wants to testify, and there are 50 more emails just like it. Sarah's eyes widened. 50. Your documentary didn't just inspire people, Sarah. It gave them hope, and now they want to be part of the solution. They want to share their stories. They want to prove that compassion works. Sarah leaned against the wall, overwhelmed. Senator, I walked into a courtroom by accident a year ago. I was just trying to support a friend, and now we're in Congress, potentially changing federal law. How did this happen? Senator Reynolds smiled. You want to know what I think? I think you were never in the wrong place. I think the universe, or God, or whatever you believe in, put you exactly where you needed to be, because you were the right person to witness that moment. You were the right person to carry that message forward. You were the right person to believe that one act of compassion could change the world. She put a hand on Sarah's shoulder, and you were right to believe it, because it did. 3 months later, the Compassionate Justice Act came up for a vote. Sarah sat in the gallery with James, Emma, Judge Morrison, and dozens of others whose lives had been touched by the 12B Foundation. The debate had been fierce. Opponents argued it was soft on crime, fiscally irresponsible, a slippery slope to lawlessness. Proponents argued it was humane, economically sound, and long overdue. Sarah's hands were clenched so tightly her knuckles were white. Emma, now 6 years old, slipped her small hand into Sarah's. Miss Sarah, are you scared? Emma whispered. Sarah looked down at this little girl who was alive and healthy because strangers chose kindness. A little bit, sweetheart. I really want this to pass. My daddy says even if it doesn't pass, we already changed the world. He says the 17 cities with 12B are proof that people care. Is that true? Sarah felt tears pricking her eyes. Your daddy is a very wise man. Yes, that's true, but it would be nice to help even more people, wouldn't it? Emma nodded solemnly. I want other kids to have what I have, a healthy daddy who doesn't have to be scared anymore. The gallery quieted as the vote began. Sarah held her breath as the electronic board lit up with votes. Green for yes, red for no. The votes came in slowly. Green, red, green, green, red, green, green. James grabbed Sarah's hand. Judge Morrison closed his eyes, perhaps praying. The final tally appeared on the screen, 67-33 in the Senate. The Compassionate Justice Act had passed. The gallery erupted in cheers. Emma jumped up and down. James pulled Sarah into a hug, both of them crying. Judge Morrison stood with his hands over his face, shoulders shaking with emotion. Senator Reynolds turned from the floor and looked up at them, giving a thumbs up with tears streaming down her face. 6 months after the bill passed, Sarah found herself back in Chicago, walking through the familiar courthouse halls. The Compassionate Justice Act was being implemented across the country. Judges were receiving training. Community support networks were being established. Lives were being changed. But today, Sarah was here for something personal. She pushed open the door to Courtroom 12B and stepped inside. The room was empty except for one man sitting in the front row. Judge Morrison looked up and smiled. I thought you might come today. Sarah sat down beside him. It's been exactly 2 years. 2 years since I walked through that door by mistake. By mistake, Judge Morrison repeated with a knowing smile. Are you still calling it that? Sarah laughed softly. No. I stopped calling it a mistake about 18 months ago. Now I call it the day my real life began. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, looking at the empty courtroom that had become sacred space for so many. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you'd made a different choice that day? Sarah asked. If you'd just sentenced James according to the law? Judge Morrison was quiet for a long moment. Every day. I think about it every day. One man would be marked as a criminal. One little girl might have lost her father. And you, he turned to look at her. You would have walked into 12A, supported your friend, and gone back to your normal life. Instead, everything changed, Sarah whispered. Everything changed, he agreed. Because I made a choice to see a person instead of a case. Because strangers chose to help instead of judge. Because you chose to stay and witness instead of leaving. Because all of us chose compassion over convenience. Sarah pulled out her phone and showed him a message. This came this morning. It's from a judge in Maine. She just handled her first case under the new protocols. A teenager caught shoplifting food because her family was hungry. Instead of juvenile detention, they connected her with food banks, got her mother into job training, and enrolled her in a mentorship program. Judge Morrison smiled. That's wonderful. But why are you showing me this? Because she ended her message with this. I thought of Courtroom 12B today. I thought of what justice with mercy looks like. Thank you for showing us the way. Sarah's voice broke. Judge, do you realize what you started? It's not just 17 cities anymore. It's entire states implementing these protocols. It's thousands of families being helped instead of punished. It's a fundamental shift in how we think about justice. Judge Morrison stood up and walked to the bench where he'd sat for 30 years. He ran his hand along the polished wood. Sarah, I didn't start this. That day with James, I was just tired. Tired of seeing the same cycles repeat. Tired of watching people fall through the cracks. Tired of enforcing laws that solved nothing. He turned to face her. I made a choice, yes, but you made a choice too. You chose to care about a stranger's story. You chose to carry that message forward. You chose to build something lasting from one moment of compassion. We all chose, Sarah said, standing up. That's the point, isn't it? We all had the power to choose differently, and when we chose compassion, everything changed. That evening, Sarah attended the monthly 12B Foundation meeting, but this wasn't in a small community center anymore. They'd outgrown that space months ago. Now they met in a dedicated building, donated by Mr. Peterson, that served as both their headquarters and a community resource center. The room was packed. Original members sat alongside new volunteers, families they'd helped mixed with people hoping to be helped. It had become something beautiful and chaotic, and thoroughly human. James stood at the front, Emma beside him. At 7 years old, she was the unofficial mascot of the movement, her bright smile appearing in countless media stories about the foundation. Before we start tonight's meeting, James began, I want to share something. 2 years ago today, I stood in courtroom 12B, expecting my life to end. Instead, I witnessed something that changed everything, not just for me and Emma, but for thousands of people across this country. He paused, emotion thick in his voice. I've been asked a lot lately about what it feels like to be part of this movement. People want to know if I feel proud, or vindicated, or special. And the truth is, I just feel grateful. Grateful that strangers saw me as human. Grateful that one woman walked into the wrong room at the right time. Grateful that compassion won. Emma tugged on his sleeve, and he picked her up. My daughter has something she wants to say. Emma leaned toward the microphone, her voice small but clear. My teacher asked us what our parents do for work. I said my daddy builds houses. But then I said he builds something else too. He builds hope. The room erupted in applause. Sarah, sitting in the back, wiped away tears. After the meeting, a young woman approached Sarah nervously. Miss Mitchell, I'm Rebecca. I was helped by the 12B Foundation in Seattle last month. My car broke down, and I couldn't get to my job. I was going to be evicted. But your volunteers, they fixed my car and covered my rent until I got back on my feet. That's wonderful, Rebecca, Sarah smiled. I'm so glad we could help. That's not why I'm here, Rebecca said, her voice strengthening. I'm here because I want to volunteer. I want to help other people the way I was helped. I want to pass it forward. Sarah felt her heart swell. That's what this is all about. Welcome to the family. As Rebecca walked away to fill out volunteer forms, Judge Morrison appeared at Sarah's side. You know what the most beautiful part of this is? What? Sarah asked. It's self-perpetuating now. People who are helped become helpers. The compassion doesn't stop. It multiplies. James helps others. Those others help more. It's exponential growth of human kindness. Sarah looked around the room at the diverse crowd of people connected by one simple principle, that everyone deserves compassion, especially when they're at their lowest point. Judge, do you remember what you said to me 2 years ago about providence? I asked if you believed in it. He nodded. I do now, Sarah said firmly. I believe I was meant to walk into that courtroom. I believe you were meant to show mercy. I believe every person here was meant to be part of this movement. Because this isn't just about helping people. It's about remembering our humanity. But not everything was perfect. 3 weeks later, Sarah received a call that threatened everything they'd built. Sarah, we have a problem. It was Marcus, one of their volunteers in Detroit. You need to see this. He sent her a news article. The headline made her stomach drop. Compassionate Justice Act under fire. Critics claim program enables criminal behavior. The article detailed a case in Phoenix where someone helped through the program had reoffended. Critics were using it as proof that compassion was weakness, that the entire system was flawed. Sarah immediately convened an emergency call with Judge Morrison, James, and the foundation's leadership team. This was bound to happen, Judge Morrison said grimly. We can't help everyone. Some people will make bad choices regardless of the support we provide. The question is, how do we respond? We respond with truth, James said firmly. Yes, some people will fail, but how many have succeeded? How many families are still together because of this program? How many kids still have their parents? Sarah pulled up statistics. Since the act passed, we've helped over 10,000 families. The reoffending rate among those families is 3%. In the traditional system, it's 67%. We're not perfect, but we're 64% better than what came before. Then that's what we tell people, Judge Morrison said. We acknowledge the failure. We express sorrow for it. But we don't let one failure erase 10,000 successes. The next day, Sarah held a press conference. Cameras flashed as she approached the podium. James stood beside her, and Judge Morrison sat in the front row. We've all seen the article about the Phoenix case, Sarah began, her voice steady despite her nerves. And I want to address it directly. Yes, someone we helped made a terrible choice. Yes, that person committed another crime. And yes, that's heartbreaking. She paused, meeting the eyes of skeptical reporters. But here's what that article didn't mention. That person received less than 10% of the support our full protocol provides because funding in that district was limited. They received emergency assistance, but not ongoing support. Not job training, not mental health services, not the community network that makes this program successful. A reporter raised her hand. Are you saying it's a funding issue? I'm saying it's a commitment issue, Sarah responded. This program works when we fully commit to it, when we provide comprehensive support, when we follow through, when we treat people with dignity over time, not just in one moment. One-time help isn't enough. Transformation requires sustained compassion. Another reporter stood. But shouldn't people be held accountable for their actions? James stepped forward to the microphone. They absolutely should, but accountability doesn't have to mean abandonment. 2 years ago, I stole medicine for my daughter. I was held accountable. I had to face court, face my actions, face the harm I caused. But I was also given support to address why I made that choice. That's the difference. He looked directly at the camera. The person in Phoenix deserves accountability, but they also deserve the full support this program is designed to provide. They didn't get that, and now we have a tragedy. That's not a failure of compassion. It's a failure of implementation.
The press conference went viral, but not in the way Sarah expected. Instead of destroying the movement, it strengthened it. Donations poured in. Volunteers signed up by the thousands. People who had been silent supporters became vocal advocates. The narrative shifted from compassion enables crime to incomplete compassion fails people. Senator Reynolds called Sarah personally. Your press conference changed the conversation. Congress is now debating increased funding, not program elimination. You turned a crisis into an opportunity. But the real surprise came 2 weeks later, when Sarah received a letter from an unlikely source, the person in Phoenix who had reoffended. The letter, written from jail, read, Ms. Mitchell, I'm the person everyone's talking about. The failure of your program. I want you to know something. Your program didn't fail. I failed. I made a choice I can't take back, and I'm facing the consequences. But I also want you to know that the little bit of help I received, the food assistance, the temporary housing, it was the first time in my life anyone treated me like I mattered. For a few weeks, I felt hope. That wasn't enough to overcome my addiction and my bad decisions, but it was something. It was more than I'd ever had before. Please don't let my failure stop you from helping others. Some of us are too broken, but many aren't. Keep fighting for them. Sarah read the letter at the next foundation meeting, her voice breaking. When she finished, the room sat in stunned silence. Then Emma, now sitting in the front row, raised her small hand. Miss Sarah, that person said they're too broken, but Daddy says nobody's too broken for love. Is that true? Sarah knelt down to Emma's level. Your daddy's right, sweetheart. Nobody's too broken for love. But sometimes people are too broken to accept help right away. Sometimes they need to hit bottom before they can climb back up. And when they're ready, we need to be there. She stood up, addressing the room. This letter reminds us of something important. We can't save everyone. We can't force people to accept help. We can't make their choices for them. But we can create a world where help is available when they're ready for it. We can be the safety net that catches people when they fall. Judge Morrison stood up. Sarah's right. The measure of our success isn't perfection. It's persistence. It's showing up, day after day, to offer compassion, even when it's rejected, even when it fails, even when it's hard, James added. And it's remembering why we started, not because we thought we could save everyone, but because we couldn't stand by and save no one. 1 year later, the movement had grown beyond anything Sarah had imagined. The 12B Foundation operated in all 50 states. The Compassionate Justice Act had been strengthened with additional funding. Training programs for judges, social workers, and community volunteers were oversubscribed. But Sarah was tired. The constant travel, the speaking engagements, the media interviews, it was taking its toll. She found herself back in Chicago, walking through the courthouse halls late one evening. When she thought she'd be alone, she pushed open the door to Courtroom 12B and froze. The room was full. Judge Morrison stood at the front. James was there with Emma, Mr. Peterson, Dorothy the nurse, Lisa the journalist, all the original players from that fateful day 3 years ago. But there were also dozens of others, people from across the country who had been helped by the foundation. Surprise, Judge Morrison said with a warm smile. We thought it was time for a reunion. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. What is this? James walked forward. Sarah, you've spent 3 years carrying this message, building this movement, fighting for people you've never met. You've forgotten to celebrate what we've accomplished, so we're celebrating for you. Emma ran up and hugged Sarah's legs. Miss Sarah, we love you. You helped save my daddy, and my daddy helped save other people, and those people helped save more people. You started it all. Sarah sank into a chair, overwhelmed. I didn't start it. I just walked into a courtroom by accident. No, Judge Morrison said gently. You walked into a courtroom with an open heart. That's what made the difference. Anyone could have witnessed what happened that day. But you chose to care. You chose to carry the message. You chose to believe that compassion could change the world. He gestured to the room full of people. Every person here is proof that you were right. Every life changed. Every family kept together. Every second chance given. It all traces back to your choice to care about a stranger's story. A woman Sarah didn't recognize stood up. Miss Mitchell, I'm Amanda from Portland. 6 months ago, the 12B Foundation helped me keep my kids when I lost my job. I just wanted to say thank you. You gave me back my family. Another person stood. I'm Robert from Miami. Your program helped my son get treatment instead of jail time for his addiction. He's been sober for 8 months. He's alive because of you. One by one, people stood and shared their stories. Stories of hope, redemption, second chances, and restored dignity. Stories of compassion defeating despair. Sarah couldn't stop crying. She'd been so focused on the work, on the next case, the next city, the next challenge, that she'd forgotten to see the impact. Forgotten to recognize that the seeds planted in Courtroom 12B 3 years ago had grown into a forest of hope. When the last person had spoken, Judge Morrison returned to the front. Sarah, we have one more surprise for you. We've established a new initiative, the Sarah Mitchell Fellowship. It will fund young activists who want to start compassion-based justice programs in their communities, because your legacy isn't just what you've built, it's inspiring others to build too. Sarah stood on shaky legs. I don't know what to say. I never expected. That's the thing about compassion, Judge Morrison interrupted gently. We never know how far it will reach. We never know whose life will touch. We just have to be willing to care, even when it's inconvenient, even when we're in the wrong courtroom. Sarah looked around the room at all these faces, strangers who had become family through shared belief in humanity's goodness. She thought about that Tuesday morning 3 years ago when her phone died and she made a wrong turn. I want to tell you all something, she began, her voice stronger now. 3 years ago, I was lost. Not physically, I knew how to get to a courtroom, but emotionally, spiritually, I was lost. I'd stopped believing people cared about each other. I'd stopped believing one person could make a difference. I'd stopped believing in hope. She walked to the center of the room. Then I walked through that door and witnessed something that changed everything. I saw a judge choose mercy. I saw strangers choose compassion. I saw a community form around one desperate father and his daughter. And I remembered something I'd forgotten. We're not meant to walk through this world alone. We're meant to help each other. Emma came and stood beside Sarah, taking her hand. Sarah looked down at this little girl who embodied everything they'd fought for. Emma asked me once if our courtroom was magic. I said the magic was in the people, but I want to add something to that. The magic is in the choice. Every single day we choose how we treat each other. We choose whether to see problems or people. We choose whether to judge or to understand. We choose whether to punish or to restore. She looked directly at Judge Morrison. You taught me that justice and mercy aren't opposites. They're partners. James, you taught me that strength comes from vulnerability. Emma, you taught me that hope is the most powerful force we have. Her voice grew passionate. To everyone in this room, everyone watching the live stream, everyone who's ever been helped or who's ever helped someone else, you are proof that compassion works. You are proof that second chances matter. You are proof that we can build a better world, one act of kindness at a time. She pulled Emma close. This little girl is alive and thriving because strangers chose to care. Thousands of families are still together because we chose compassion over convenience. An entire justice system is changing because we chose to see humanity even in the hardest moments. Sarah's voice broke with emotion. So here's my message to anyone listening. You don't need a title or a position of power to change the world. You just need to care. You need to be willing to walk into the wrong place and choose to stay. You need to be willing to see people, really see them, and choose compassion. Judge Morrison joined her, putting his arm around her shoulders. The question isn't whether you'll face someone in need. You will. The question is, what will you choose in that moment? Will you judge, or will you understand? Will you punish, or will you restore? Will you walk away, or will you stay and help? James stepped forward with Emma. 3 years ago I was at my lowest point. I thought my story was over. But it wasn't over. It was just beginning. Because people chose compassion. Because Sarah chose to care. Because all of you chose to believe that broken people could be put back together. Emma looked up at the crowd with her bright, innocent eyes. My daddy says everyone needs help sometimes. And when we help people, we make the world better. Is that true? Sarah knelt down beside Emma, addressing her but speaking to everyone. Yes, sweetheart. That's the truest thing in the world. We all need help sometimes. And when we help each other, when we choose kindness over judgment, when we choose compassion over indifference, that's when magic happens. That's when the world changes. She stood up, facing the cameras that would carry this message across the country. So if you take one thing from our story, let it be this. There are no wrong turns when your heart is open to the right thing. There are no strangers when we choose to see each other's humanity. There is no problem so big that compassion can't make it smaller. There is no person so broken that love can't help them heal. 3 years ago, I walked into Courtroom 12B by mistake.
But it wasn't a mistake at all. It was exactly where I needed to be, exactly when I needed to be there. Because that courtroom taught me what I'd forgotten, that we're all connected, that we all matter, that compassion isn't weakness, it's the strongest force we have. She looked around at every face in the room, at the cameras, at the future. The question isn't whether you'll have a chance to show compassion. You will. The question is, will you take it? Will you be the person who chooses kindness when judgment is easier? Will you be the person who stays when leaving is more convenient? Will you be the person who sees humanity when others see only problems? Because that's how the world changes. Not through grand gestures or sweeping legislation, though those help. The world changes when ordinary people make extraordinary choices to care. When a judge steps down from his bench to help a desperate father. When strangers stand up to support someone they've never met. When a woman with a dead phone battery walks into the wrong courtroom and chooses to stay. Sarah's final words rang out with conviction. We all have the power to be someone's turning point. We all have the power to be the moment when someone's story changes from tragedy to hope. We all have the power to choose compassion, so choose it. Every day, every moment, every chance you get. Choose compassion, choose humanity, choose hope, because sometimes the wrong turn leads you exactly where you need to be. This story is dedicated to everyone who has ever chosen compassion over judgment, mercy over punishment, and hope over despair. Your choices change the world.
Thank you very much for listening. Please let us know what you think of this story in the comments. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any other videos.